onboarding as an employee of Facebook, not Meta, Facebook. And in it, company ideologies. It's a lot of kind of corporate culture written as altruism in convincing the workforce that we're really trying to make the world a better place. Now, if anybody worked in tech 10 years ago, you remember that every tech company had this like elevator pitch motto about how they were saving the world. Like they were democratizing this, they were making accessible that. Everyone was out here just trying to make the world a better place. As consumers and as employees, I think a lot of us like were pretty gullible to it. This book had some bold images, okay? It had like the Berlin Wall, and it has this really particular, this is Rupert Murdoch. Let me read this to you. Historically, those who control the media controlled the message. If you are the only one with a printing press, you control what people read. Same with radio, same with TV. But what happens when people can put their message in front of a lot of people? When the playing field is level, when everyone has a printing press, the ones with the best ideas are the ones people listen to. Influence can no longer be owned, it must be earned. So, what happens when you control the algorithm that surfaces in a sea of noise what people read? Video isn't a tell-all about my time at Meta. It's more grounding that I want to talk about, you know, TikTok, Meta, and Zuck. If you care, my credentials are, since my onboarding 10 years ago, I've stayed in social media, tech, and I specialize in user protection products. So the bad shit that happens on social media platforms, my job is to build products or modify products or build processes that is able to protect people at scale. Point number one as background, and nothing I'm going to talk about isn't something that's already public knowledge on TechCrunch about Zuck or Meta. Zuck wants his products in China. He wants those 1 billion constituents as his consumers. He has always maintained friendly relationships with China, and he wants in on that market, and they've never given it to him because ironically, they view his products and platforms as a threat to their social stability. Adding to background, and if anybody worked at Meta 10 years ago, feel free to help validate this. Users are generally categorized in different demographic buckets, inclusive of age. The user base between 13 and 17 was something that Zuck had like a very deep interest in, like he had a very vested interest in. He really wanted that demographic to be very active on his platforms. He spent a lot of money trying to accurately identify users of that age bracket and spent a lot of investment trying to build features, so much so like spinning an entire product vertical to entice teenagers to be more active on his platform. Now, despite his recent toxic turn, it's a pretty smart strategy for a couple reasons. Number one, teenagers spend a lot of time on social media. Number two, they define a lot of social media trends amongst each other that then kind of permeate out, right? Number three, from a consumer perspective, you start them young. Their next life stage is one in which they will have expendable income, and they will have expendable income throughout their entire life, all the way until like probably right before retirement, which makes them very valuable ad consumers for a very long time. The whole lobbying for the TikTok ban, like breaking lobbying records, that's a fuck you. Both to the demographic that is very prevalent on this platform but refuses to go to his, as well as the country that owns this app that his products were never able to penetrate. My second point, and lots of people have already touched on this, is the farce of national security. This app does not take more or less consumer data than its competitors, than Meta, than Twitter, than Snapchat. The concern of national security is what the home country of this app's parent company would do with its data. Here's the thing. As a government, as a country, of which I am a constituent, a citizen of, we have spent the last decades criticizing other countries for censorship, only to default to exactly the same type of tactic. So I personally believe criticizing your own country is the highest form of patriotism. I would suggest to our own government that putting a senile orange convicted felon in the highest seat of power in our country the increased disparity in wealth, the lack of social safety net is probably doing a really good job instilling unrest in our society more than anything that the Chinese government could do with that data. Piggy off of that, which segues into my point number 3, is that there are countries, governing regions in the world in which consumer protection is so important. They pass laws, right? And within those laws, they often dictate what type of data from a user you are allowed to use for what purpose. So if the law stipulates that you are not allowed to use demographic information for ads targeting, companies would be less inclined to collect that information. Therefore, you likely have less concern about national security as a result of this data. European Union, for example, via the Digital Services Act, has stipulations on algorithmic kind of preferences of content. As a consumer, you have a right to understand what algorithms at play that causes certain types of content to be surfaced to you. It's also illegal under the Digital Services Act to use a user's demographic information for the purposes of ads targeting. Meta complied with this by actually providing their EU users a non-algorithmic feed, so just like a chronological feed. So it goes as far as to request that Google return search results in a non-algorithmic manner, which I am not actually sure they're currently compliant with. My point is, if our country fundamentally cared about this, they would pass the laws to prevent this. But what we're really saying is, we're not going to pass a law because only those that pay get to play, and everybody else will just boot out. We'll just boot out their competitors. If you want to get mad, I think Temu goes next. Chinese brand products like Labubu, a lot of the Chinese gaming companies have already been in discussion. There's a time where tech's biggest opportunity gain was globalization, and I think we're just taking 3 steps back from that now because it turns out we couldn't compete. Government is proving is that it is for sale, because in this country, if you are wealthy enough to contribute $100 million to a PAC, you can influence the lack of lawmaking for companies and technologies that you have invested in. Andreessen Horowitz, Venture Capital Firm, $100 million to a PAC to elect the current president-elect so that they can keep deregulation of data, keep data a free and open thing to collect, because all of their portfolio investments are in artificial intelligence. What does the artificial intelligence needs? It needs your data. It needs data, massive amounts of it, in order to train. Industry tech fucked itself up by lack of transparency to its consumers about what their end goal is. We touted all these altruistic things about improving people's lives, but at the end of the day, a lot of deception happened. And this is not just social media, right? It was also ride sharing, it was Airbnb, it was crypto, it's now AI. In conclusion, it's all corrupt. Number 2, if you are a middle-aged man going through a midlife crisis, try not to let the testosterone replacement therapy seep into your brain. Number 3, take care of yourself. I'll see you in snail mail.